In 1968, local Channel 10 Philadelphia television reporter Bill Baldini was just 26 years old the first time he set foot on Pennhurst property. He'd heard from numerous viewers that the local mental health facility, the Pennhurst State School and Hospital, located just a quick 30 minutes northwest of Philly in Spring City, about 30 miles away, was a chamber of horrors. He decided to check it out and promised himself that if 1/10 of what people told him they saw inside Pennhurst was actually happening, he would do an investigative story on the abuse committed there and expose it. Baldini was able to get inside Pennhurst through a membership with the JCs of Philadelphia. Nice to have a JC suck subject doing some good this time. John Wayne Gacy, real big into the JCs, if you will recall. Once inside, Baldini was horrified by what he saw. He said, "I was never so shocked and surprised in my life." He recalled telling his boss what he had seen, and his boss didn't believe him at first. He begged to do a story that ended up becoming a 5-part news report for WCAU Channel 10 that shocked the people of Delaware Valley. Baldini showed the people in and around Philadelphia what life was like at Pennhurst, and they were disgusted and outraged. They had 80 infants in one ward, Baldini said. There were 80 metal cribs standing against the walls. Inside those cribs were children anywhere from 6 months to 6 or 7 years old, abandoned to psychologically rot in the facility. His news director and executive producers actually cried when they watched the footage. Usually back then you got 1.5 minutes for a story, Baldini would later explain. The first story on Pennhurst was 7 minutes. Baldini's story eventually led to our government investigating the treatment of the patients at Pennhurst, which led to the institution being shut down for good. And I think Baldini's story led to a lot of people taking a closer look at themselves. Now that they knew this was going on, what should be done with members of society less fortunate than they were? It's a question many of us are still asking. We take a hard look at Pennhurst today, and we examine our own recent cultural attitudes towards, people who are intellectually disabled. In a let's try and take better care of each other, let's not suffer the little children edition of Timesuck.
You're listening to Timesuck.
Happy Monday, Timesuckers. How you holding up after Friday's episode? I'm still feeling a little mentally fragile after sucking my way through the Toy Box Killer. I keep thinking of that room, man. I keep thinking of that FBI agent who couldn't handle what she'd seen and just walked outside and, it's going to haunt me for a while, I think. There's going to be some tough moments today, but overall, much more positive episode. An episode featuring a lot of people trying to do good, trying to do their best to change things for the better. I am Dan Cummins, a.k.a. the Jerk-Off King. I'm the Master Butt Blaster. No, that doesn't sound right. No, I'm the Master Sucker. There we go. I'm the fourth-legged Bojangles. I'm the voice box of Michael motherfucking McDonald. What a fool believes he sees. The wise man has the power to reason away what seems to be is always better than nothing. And then after that, I just go to dog levels, where only dogs can fucking hear and hate it. And you are not listening to the lead singer for the world's worst, greatest, what? Doobie Brothers cover band. No, you're listening to Timesuck. I misspoke there, but I do think that's actually pretty correct. I think I am the world's best, worst Doobie Brothers vocalist, cover band thing, person. All right, let's fucking get away from the Doobie Brothers. Kicking off today with some positive thoughts. You probably need them after that, after I just blew your eardrums out. Sending positive energy today for Timesucker Larry Harrell's little girl, Mabry, just recently brought into the world on February 15th. Already undergoing open heart surgery tomorrow, July 17th. Larry's called upon the Timesuck community to ask that we say a quick word for his daughter. Quick prayer for Mabry Harrell. So pray to your God, Timesuckers. Pray to Jesus, Allah, Yahweh, Buddha. Pray to Nimrod. Pray to whoever else you look to for guidance or clarity. Pray for little Mabry. This brave little champion of a meat sack. She needs your thoughts right now to mend her broken little heart. So I don't know you, little Mabry, but I love you. And I'm telling you to fight with everything you've got tomorrow. Don't fuck around, little girl. You grow up to be a force of good in this world. A world that can be so cruel and so dark. You grow up, you be one of the good guys. You change things for the better. Be the beautiful, healthy, well-balanced, well-intentioned little creature your dad needs you to be. I believe in you. And so our thoughts are with you. Our thoughts are with you, Larry. Now, time for some even more positive energy. We've picked our Space Lizard charity for July. Thanks to Space Lizard Patreon subscriptions, we're giving another $500 this month to charity. And this month, we're donating it to our very own Adam Thoreau's Good People Doing Good Things.org. His nonprofit organization specializes in random acts of kindness, coffee for firefighters, meals for veterans, books for school kids, toys for kids who can't afford them. A lot of wonderful things, and you can help him. You can help him donate. He's out there in Rhode Island. You can go to, goodpeopledoinggood.org, and the link is in the episode description today. So, yeah, man, we've got quite a community. Man, I keep thinking about you, Larry. Man, I can't imagine, man. I can't imagine what you're feeling right now. But Larry, we are thinking of you, man. We are thinking of you, little girl. Okay, now a bit of me promo. Not much. Flat Earth Tour rolls into SoCal today. I hope I had a great time in Orlando. I had to record this before traveling to Orlando, so I'm gonna assume it went well. So yay! Man, I hope it went well. Hitting the Comedy Store in La Jolla, California, July 20th through the 22nd. That's this weekend. That's this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Next week, hitting Dayton, Ohio, just 2 nights, July 27th and 28th. From after there, I'm going to roll into Side Splitters in Tampa. I'm going to be at the Palm Beach Improv. I'm going to be at the Zanies in Chicago, right across from Second City. All that in August. Then I'm going to be at the Denver Comedy Works at the end of August, doing another live Timesuck on Sunday the 26th. More tour dates, more live podcasts coming up. Portland, Tacoma, Hollywood, Huntington Beach, California. A lot more at dancummins.tv. A lot of busy tour in the next few months. Also, thanks again for the continued ratings, new Timesuckers, man. They mean so much. They spread the suck. They let me know that the late nights are paying off and I'm on the right path. Sometimes, depending on what they say, they help me know that I'm on the wrong path in some way. I got to step it up and fucking correct it. Got to right the ship. Is that a saying? I think I just made that up. One last thing. Limited edition Chikatilo kits are sold out in the large T-shirt size. Sorry, we will not be making more of that kit. There's still a lot of XLs. Still a lot of the other sizes. Some of the other sizes are very close to being sold out. So thanks everyone who got them. They're fucking too ridiculous. And I love them. And now, let's delve back into a look at the Pennhurst State Hospital and look into our own cultural attitudes towards those who cannot, for whatever reason, take care of themselves. Before we go any further, there is another Timesuck episode that serves as a good companion to this one. It's way back, episode 20, Insane Asylums, released January 30, 2017. And in that one, I give an overview of America's history of how those deemed mentally ill or sometimes feeble-minded, as it was called, whatever other labels were given to people deemed a burden by society, and just how those people have been treated throughout the history of the U.S. or not treated. It provides some additional context regarding why institutions were built in the U.S. and what went on in a lot of them. Also, I do need to just really clarify that on the web, a lot of info seems to portray the Pennhurst State Hospital as the Pennhurst Insane Asylum, and that's not true. It was not that. It was an institution for people who were at the time referred to as feeble-minded, people now said to have intellectual disabilities. It was one of the first institutions of that kind built in the world. Quote-unquote insane asylums had been built, for decades kind of prior, had been around a little bit longer, but this was a new type of institution. Okay. So that out of the way, let's dive back into Bill Baldini's 1968 investigative journalism piece. The first segment of his expose opened with Baldini narrating over images of the patients at Pennhurst, saying, "We ship them 25 miles out of town and forget them while they decay from neglect." I watched Baldini's series where viewers see children strapped to beds, crying on dirty floors, rocking back and forth and cradling their heads. It reminds me, honestly, of scenes from American Horror Story's second season at Asylum. That season set in an insane asylum where people who shouldn't be there were there, where quote-unquote sane people would be mixed in with people with severe, cognitive disabilities or mental illnesses, a place where you would absolutely dread to be taken to, a place you'd try and escape from, a place like Pennhurst. Baldini continues saying, "The horrible and almost inhumane conditions that prevail at Pennhurst are not the fault of a handful of dedicated doctors and administrators that are employed there. No, the children, as they are called, are rotting in their dreadful plate, We can thank society for forsaking them. We have failed them. I think it's supposed to be rotting in this dreadful place. I don't know. Maybe that's some fun language he had. That's the quote pulled from another transcript of his series. Dreadful plate. All right. Baldini's footage is powerful, disturbing stuff, man. There are these are people's children, their brothers, sisters, sons, and daughters. In an interview years later with the Institute on Disabilities at Temple University, Baldini claimed the conditions were so bad at Pennhurst that what they were witnessing was so gut wrenching and jarring that his sound and camera operators wanted to walk out. He had to give them breaks so they could emotionally reset themselves in order to keep filming for 5 straight days. He claims the reaction from the public was so strong after his first segment aired that his boss told him to go immediately back there and continue shooting so they could air another segment the next night. People were outraged and intrigued. Could this really be happening in their America? Could it really be happening in 1968? Baldini worked himself into the ground investigating Pennhurst. He actually seemed, when you watch his footage, he seems visibly just frazzled and exhausted. He's irritated. You watch the interviews he conducts with some of the doctors and staff. He can't hide his disgust and frustration. It's actually a little uncomfortable watching him grill some of the employees who honestly seem to be doing the best job they can. They're just working in horrible conditions. And I feel for him, man. I do understand their position in a small way. When I very briefly worked in the system, so to speak, working at Child Protective Services where I started, then at the Crisis Residential Treatment Center and some other group homes around Spokane a little after that. Easily one of the hardest parts of those jobs, one of the aspects that got to me the most was a feeling of just utter powerlessness. You knew a lot of times what needed to be done, what should be done, but you didn't have the power to do it. It couldn't be pulled off. Like you knew that many of the people you were working with needed maybe to be placed in the care of someone else. I was working with a lot of teens. Sometimes you met other relatives who were dying to provide a good home for the kids you were working with, and you knew they would be a good guardian, but oftentimes the kid's current guardian or parent was a fucking dirtbag. Was somebody you knew was just never going to provide a loving, safe home for them, just wasn't willing to but sign the papers, though, to let someone else do the job they clearly couldn't. That happened a lot. Sometimes maybe it's their pride, maybe they wanted that welfare money, maybe they just, were just a fucking hateful person who didn't want to see their own kid have a chance at a better life. There are those parents out there, man. If there's one thing we've learned over and over here on the Suck, it's there's some fucking pieces of shit out there. And, there was nothing you could do to change some of these assholes' minds, and so you would end up placing a kid back into a home where you knew they were being abused. You knew they were probably being molested in some cases. At the very least, horribly neglected, and there wasn't a fucking thing you could do about it. And that used to tear me apart. Sometimes it's easy to know what the problem is, but it is a whole nother can of worms you got to deal with to actually fix the problem, to actually solve it. Well, Baldini did his damnedest to try and figure out how to solve the problem he was looking at in Pennhurst. He worked himself sick, literally shooting, writing, producing, editing, sleeping in the women's room on the news station for only 3 to 4 hours a night to expose every problem he could find. By the 5th day, he lost his voice to exhaustion, could no longer narrate his own program. And that really is from the articles. It says that he's sleeping in the women's room. I thought that was like a weird note. Like, why can't you sleep in the men's room? I'm guessing because the women's room probably had like a little fucking, like a little, not a couch, but I'm trying to think why I've been in some women's rooms, but I have. I don't know why. Now I'm trying to figure out why, but I have memories of seeing like a little bench, like a little padded bench in some of those where I guess you can sit and watch your friend, I don't know, pee in the stall or just wait for her to be done. You don't have those in a lot of men's restrooms. So, and men's restrooms, sometimes I've had to this is why I've done it. Sometimes what I'll do is if I'm out in public and the men's room is locked and I really got to go, I'm just like, all right, fuck it, I'll just go in the women's room. Like if it's a one at a timer, for sure. I won't go into it if it's multiple, unless someone's guarding the door, But I have noticed that the conditions in a women's restroom tend to be way better than conditions in men's restrooms. I know some of you women already know this already, probably most of you, that men can be fucking just dirty animals when it comes to bathroom hygiene. Partly due to us having to stand up and, shoot it a little farther to get in the toilet in some cases. But Jesus, even as a guy, I'm amazed at some of the horror shows I've seen in the bathroom where it's like, dude, how did you shit there? How did you even get it there? Like, what is going on the floor around here? Did someone just die in here? Did I just miss paramedics taking out a dead body? And but for some reason they didn't shut the bathroom down for any kind of crime scene, and they didn't clean it. Anyway, maybe I'm getting way too too far off track thinking about why he was sleeping in the women's room. But anyway, he couldn't even narrate the last installment. He lost his voice. He just, from exhaustion, a colleague stepped in to narrate it. Because what he found was intense, man. There was only 2 attendants, for example, watching those 80 kids in the cages we mentioned earlier. When he asked why the kids were put in cages and why they also couldn't walk, he was told they didn't have enough staff to set up mattresses on the floor in order for these children to learn how to crawl. So they basically just left them in cages. And again, children 6, 7 years old in this instance didn't know how to walk, didn't know how to talk, just sitting in a little cage. Fucking terrible. In an interview with Dr. Jesse Fear, and that really is his name, there was a dude there working there named Dr. Fear. Dr. Fear, your patient's here to see you. Fuck, it's terrible. He shared other disturbing details of Pennhurst with Baldini, like how residents who would act out would be punished by downgrading them a little bit. This is a weird thing to do to somebody. By this, what he would mean is that, say somebody has an IQ of like 80. Someone's just a few points outside the normal range, but their family couldn't take care of them for whatever reason. It could be somebody who just needs a loving family, a stable home, and education more than treatment. If they got that, they could become a functioning member of society. And then these people would be frustrated that they're fucking stuck in an institution, and they would act out. And then, as punishment, they would be put in a different level of one of the buildings, a different room with people of IQs of, say, 10, 20, 30, people who didn't know how to speak, people who could have severe cognitive disabilities might flail themselves about wildly or constantly scream or shit on the floor or try to hit or kick anybody who came near them. Can you imagine being locked in a ward like that if you're a person with an IQ in or borderline in the normal range? And then the person just to cherry on top, the person putting you there is fucking Dr. Fear. It's ridiculous. Baldini pointed out that the local zoo treated its animals better than the patients were treated at Pennhurst. More money was spent on food and care on average for animals in the zoo than on humans at Pennhurst. Like the zoo would spend $7.15 each day on an animal, where Pennhurst only spent $5.90 per resident at the time of the airing. He also pointed out that the animals were in less crowded conditions at the zoo than the people were at Pennhurst. The superintendent claimed that the capacity of Pennhurst was 1,984 residents. At the time of Baldini's investigation, there were 2,791 residents. That's 40% above absolute max capacity. And I do stress that he was outraged, but Baldini's report never points at the employees at Pennhurst as being the real problem. He points at the system being the real problem. The institution was not getting proper funding. It wasn't properly staffed. For example, there was 900 women living there, but not one full-time gynecologist. There are, no teachers working there with special education degrees. Officials knew that hundreds of patients should be transferred to better institutions, but couldn't do so. Couldn't find other institutions to take them. More doctors needed to be hired. The buildings needed to be either rebuilt in many cases or condemned in others, but they didn't have the funds to do any of that. Eventually, something would be done. Baldini's report would lead eventually to more investigations, which would then lead to some lawsuits, which would then lead to the facility being closed down. And then, tragically, as a weird endnote to the story, Baldini would end up spending the rest of his life in prison after being found guilty of flashing his penis at several kids near several Philadelphia grade schools in 1971. Now, let's dig into the rise and fall of Pennhurst in today's Timesuck timeline.
Strap on those boots, soldier. We're marching down a Timesuck timeline.
Quick note before we begin. Baldini, to my knowledge, never flashes penis at anyone. I just want to let you sit on that for a little bit, kid or not. What a fucking weird footnote to his story that would have been, and what a weird thing for me not to address. Just to be like, yeah, this guy, he's a social justice warrior. He exposed a lot of things, and he fucking showed his dick to some kids. Anyway, moving on. That'd be terrible for the story. Baldini fought for the people of Philly who could not fight for themselves. He was a champion of social justice and reform. And then, inexplicably, he started whipping his dick out around town, local schools. Baldini's weenie was the headline in a lot of papers. Baldini's weenie made one too many cameos on October 7th, 1971, near the monkey bars of Radney Elementary School. He was incarcerated and then never heard from again. Why couldn't Baldini get a hold of his weenie? Or rather, why couldn't he let it go more often? Anyway, 1897, the Polk Center opens. It's the first state-operated institution in Pennsylvania for people with intellectual disabilities. Prior to institutions, the mentally ill and the mentally impaired were generally cared for or not cared for by their families or put in almshouses in the U.S. And the quality of care varied considerably. Some people were cared for by their families, and, some were locked in a room or a basement or attic. Sounds horrific on the surface, and it is. And, sure, sometimes it was. But people don't always have the resources to handle the burden life is placed upon them. That's what I always think about with stories like this. A lot of people get so fucking outraged, but it's like, would they do anything any different? Like, oh my God, how could they just lock them away? All right. What would you do? What would you do if you're some 19th century homesteader? You're struggling to grow enough crops to feed the family of 10 you got, 2 of the kids have polio already. Dad has a bad back. Mom has the gout. Everyone has a touch of scurvy. A lot of scurvy back there. There's no running water, no indoor plumbing. You're living in a 2-room shanty. And then, the 8th kid is born with severe disabilities, mentally and physically. This 8th kid's never going to be able to help around the house, never going to be able to work the farm, needs to be fed, cleaned, kept from hurting himself. Pretty soon, even though he needs the care of an infant, he's too big to hold, too big to put in a sling. What if giving him the care he needs takes so much time away from other family duties, other farm duties, that you're putting the whole family at risk on some level in order to take care of one member of the family? Now, I may be being a little bit dramatic, but only to illustrate the point, it's not always possible to make only noble, fair decisions for everybody in life. Again, easy to say, how could you, but truly, how would you truly do anything better? Food for thought in this episode. This is going to be a big theme here. What is the solution? Before institutions were designed for the mentally ill, mentally impaired, or the disabled, people were also placed in almshouses, which were large group homes built usually by churches to provide for those in the community who could not take care of themselves. And these places were kind of a little bit of everything. They housed the mentally ill, cognitively delayed or impaired, the feeble, the elderly, sometimes orphans, oftentimes, like people who are like blind, deaf, paralyzed, unable to take care of themselves for a number of other reasons. There wasn't specialized care because there wasn't specialists. There wasn't fucking physical therapists. There wasn't experts when it came to how to care for people with a variety of disabilities. That shit didn't exist. 5 years later, an act of the Pennsylvania legislature created Pennhurst State School and Hospital, May 15th, 1903, and the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. It's all kind of like part of this big one complex. This pairing with today's knowledge of various medical conditions is obviously less than ideal. People who suffer from some condition that results in them having an extremely low IQ and people who suffer from seizures are two very different groups of people. Epilepsy is a central nervous system, a neurological disorder, which brain activity becomes abnormal, causing seizures or periods of unusual behavior, sensations, and sometimes loss of awareness. According to the Mayo Clinic, anyone can develop epilepsy. Epilepsy affects both males and females of all races, ethnic backgrounds, and ages. Seizure symptoms can vary widely. Some people with epilepsy simply stare blankly for a few seconds during a seizure. Others repeatedly twitch their arms or legs. Treatment with medication or sometimes surgery, can control seizures for the majority of people with epilepsy. Some people require lifelong treatment to control seizures, but for others, the seizures eventually go away. Some children with epilepsy may outgrow the condition with age. Now, note the clinic doesn't say anything about any sort of cognitive impairment, any sort of intellectual disability. How shitty would that be if you're very intelligent, hyper aware of what's happening around you, and then you're committed to an institution where you are locked up with people literally, and I'm not being flippant or insulting, but people literally drooling on themselves, unable to speak, borderline catatonic, people literally banging their heads into the wall, mumbling to themselves, people literally pissing and shitting themselves, etc. They put some fucking straitjacket on you. It does nothing to help your seizures at all. Does leave you unable to defend yourself from the variety of untreated, mental impairment that surrounds you. That does not sound fun. Also, initially, I should note that epileptics and the intellectually disabled were housed in separate locations, but I paint that scenario because overcrowding almost immediately led to many of them sharing the same space. Between 1903 and 1908, the first buildings of the Eastern State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic are completed on a site known locally as Crab Hill, an area named after the hundreds or possibly even thousands of forest crabs that lived on the hill at the time. Now, weird side note, sadly, because of the institution's construction, this local subspecies of the eastern North American land crab now thought to be completely extinct. But for the first few years of the institution being open, these land crabs were a bit of a problem. They had to be exterminated on numerous occasions. They kept building nests inside the walls of the hospital, said to be the size of house cats. And while their pinchers were not strong enough to cut off a finger or a toe, they could and did pinch hard enough to create gashes that had to be closed with stitches a lot of the time. They could also fly short distances using some kind of helicopter propeller type appendage emanating from the center of their backs, and they could start fires with their minds. Land crabs, by the way, are in the same animal genus as the Florida sea chicken, which includes a variety of other species that are not fucking real. Tell me one of you still thought for a few seconds that there used to be a small forest crab living in Pennsylvania that could also fly around like a weird little helicopter. No, I have no idea what Crab Hill is named after. The facility is situated in Chester County, near the borough of Spring City. I'm a fucking jackass. I just keep thinking about these crabs. Sorry, that's so funny to me. It was a huge institution. It was a whole complex of structures: the Philadelphia Building, Quaker Hall, Rockwell Hall, Franklin Hall, Noble Hall, Union Hall, Vincennes Hall, Tennekim Hall, Industry Hall, a lot of fucking halls. Most of the buildings were completed within the first 2 years of the facility's opening. Numerous farm buildings also completed in the first wave of construction, as well as a sewage plant, as well as a power plant. And it had all this shit because, well, today, like, Philly is, basically grown to the point that, Pennhurst is located in the suburbs of the suburbs, down the road from an outlet mall. But back then it was in the country. That was part of the point of it. I think Baldini said 25 miles. When I looked at MapQuest, it said about 30 miles from Philly proper. To be away from the city, separated from everybody, was the point of it. These people were sent to a place where no one would have to see them. No one would have to think about them. Truly ostracized from the people of Philadelphia, so they didn't want to have to feel any guilt over sending them over there. And there is another reason they were sent far away that's even more fucked up. The so-called best minds of the 19th century had become convinced that poverty, crime, prostitution, drunkenness, etc., all caused by, quote, mental defect. And removing the, quote, defectives from society and preventing their procreation would certainly solve the problem of the feeble-minded. For all time, while doing so would also cure the ills of society for which they were being blamed. Pennhurst was a product of pseudoscience that asserted that people with intellectual disabilities needed to be shut away from the world for their own benefit and, more important to these people, for the benefit of the larger society around them. These people thought they could rid society of essentially like criminal nature by sending people with cognitive disorders out to institutions and keeping them from breeding. I'm not sure how they arrived at this conclusion about, like the criminal stuff. Like, had any of these leading minds ever met a criminal? A lot of criminals, are anything but feeble-minded. Did they think Billy the Kid and the Jesse James gang, all those guys were, other outlaws, were mentally handicapped? I'm pretty sure you don't pull off a stagecoach robbery if literally everyone in your gang has the intellectual capacity of like a young child. I feel like the leading minds of the day could have thought this one through a little bit more, a little less scotch, gentlemen, a little more discussion. I don't know. Maybe they were just tired. Sometimes you make bad decisions when you're tired. Maybe they just needed one good night's rest on a Lisa mattress. God damn it. Today's Timesuck is brought to you by Lisa, driven by the mission to provide a better place to sleep for everybody. Lisa is an innovative direct-to-consumer online mattress brand, a company that is socially conscious, a company that hates people sleeping in cages. If Pennhurst would have been ran by Lisa Mattress, it'd still be here today because it'd be a good place to go. It'd be a model institution. Why? Because Lisa cares. For every 10 mattresses Lisa sells, they donate one to a shelter through their 110 program. Who else does that? I love it. They also plant one tree for every mattress sold, donate 1% of each employee's time to volunteer for local causes. Not to mention, with the patented universal adaptive feel, Lisa is designed for all types of sleepers. Features 3 premium foam layers, including a 2-inch Avena foam top layer for cooling and breathability, a 2-inch memory foam middle layer for body contouring and pressure relief, a 6-inch dense core support foam for durability and structure, works for sleepers of all sizes, and is good for some bedroom tomfoolery. My wife, Lindsay, Queen of the Suck, she loves sleeping on a Lisa mattress, on ours, and sometimes she loves not sleeping on that Lisa mattress. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean? Those foam layers, they can handle some pressure. And now Lisa is continuing to expand its offerings to include the Lisa pillow, blanket, foundation, and frame. Try a Lisa mattress in your own home for 100 nights risk-free. Available in the U.S., UK, Canada, and Germany online with free shipping. This 100% American-made mattress ships compressed in a box right to your door. You can try it at the Lisa Dream Gallery in Soho, New York City, Virginia Beach, at over 80 West Elm stores nationwide. Get $160 off when you go to leesa.com/timesuck. Link in the episode description. You fucking get over there. All right, now back to a story about a place that undoubtedly had nothing but the shittiest of shit mattresses. wouldn't be surprised if they had mattresses literally made out of shit. The original idea for Pennhurst was to erect a facility for not less than 500 persons and specified the building shall be in two groups, one for educational and industrial department and one for the custodial or asylum department. It was declared that this institution shall be entirely and specifically devoted to the reception, detention, care, and training of epileptics and of idiotic and feeble-minded persons of either sex. Shall provide separate classification of the numerous groups embraced under the terms epileptics and idiotic and imbecile and feeble-minded. I know, terms change, don't they? Cases afflicted with other epilepsy and paralysis shall have a due proportion of space and care in the custodial department. It also talks about that. Specifically determined that the process of an agricultural training course shall be primarily considered in the educational department, employment of the inmates in the care and raising of stock and the cultivation of small fruits, vegetables, roots, etc. shall be made tributary, when possible, to the maintenance of the institution. All inmates shall be subject of such rules and regulations as the Board of Trustees may adopt. And yes, you are hearing about how they were supposed to work, which I'm not, I don't know, morally opposed to, but that became a big kind of problem too, is basically some of these people became essentially like indentured servants, or really, I guess the more proper term would be slaves. Like they weren't able to leave, they weren't allowed to leave, and they had to work. A lot of the food would be grown at Pennhurst for the people of Pennhurst by the inmates. Patients. But I say inmates because in my mind, it seems like a prison. And again, eventually, because of overcrowding, the separation of different groups would not last. One person, is there because their IQ is 20. Another is there because they have seizures. Someone else has no seizures. Their IQ is above average, but, they're paralyzed. Their legs don't work right, and off to Pennhurst they go. It ended up being essentially just this isle of misfit toys. The construction of Pennhurst, almost a continual process for 25 years, beginning when the legislature authorized the institution, 1903, stopping at the end of the 1920s when the Great Depression began. The Eastern Pennsylvania institution admitted its first client on November 23rd, 1908, and there were problems basically right from the start. Beginning as early as 1912, the board reports contained numerous complaints about the need for funds to enact changes and repairs to buildings that were less than a decade old. So it opened 4 years. They're already like, shit's falling apart. The 1912 report included requests for $25,000 for general repairs on buildings that had only been used for 4 years. Again, included on the list of needed work was to paint the buildings, replace unsanitary closets and unsafe bathrooms, rebuild stairways, add such ventilating apparatus as is absolutely necessary. Overcrowding was a problem almost as soon as Pennhurst opened its doors. Designed originally, as I've stated, for epileptics and persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, there was tremendous pressure almost immediately to admit many other different people from society steeped in a eugenics movement who wanted to remove from the gene pool of various people, including just immigrants, orphans, criminals. I am going to come back to the phrase eugenics movement here in a bit. For now, we're going to keep going, but that's the problem. Again, there wasn't the specialization we have now, and they just basically, some family didn't want to take care of for whatever reason, they would try and put them in an institution of some sort. The stated mission of Pennhurst to house epileptics and the feeble-minded came under fire within the institution as early as 1912 as well. And that year, the superintendent reported to the Board of Trustees in chilling language that it is without question absolutely wrong to place the feeble-minded and epileptic in the same institution. They are not the same. They are different. One from the other, one as day, one as night. They are mentally, physically, and morally incompatible and require entirely different treatment. So at least some people back then understood how stupid it was to house epileptics alongside those with severe intellectual disabilities. However, the admission of individuals with epilepsy and normal intelligence would continue for years. Why? Because, again, the society just didn't know where else to put these people. Didn't have any other place to put these people. Eventually, however, the mission of the institution was eventually clarified, and for a while, only people with intellectual disabilities were admitted. Now, while the terms mental hospital and insane asylum are often used in association with Pennhurst, again, it was neither. It was supposed to be this idyllic, thriving community for those who did not fit to societal norms. It was supposed to be an institution that, has its working farm with cows, chickens, and pigs, and bunch of different crops. It had an orchard, with cherry trees. There was a shoe repair shop, mattress making facility. Not a Lisa one. And also not a shit one, to my knowledge. They also weren't making mattresses out of shit. They had a wood shop, rug weaving course. The people were trying to build some life skills. Some people eventually, would get out of Pennhurst and be able to go hold, jobs and things. They had dances, Boy Scout troops, baseball teams, visits from the circus. For many years, the Hoxie Brothers Circus would make a annual one-day appearance at Pennhurst. I guess some of the residents would join the circus during these annual visits. In my mind, I picture some of them escaping with the circus. Holiday parties, band concerts, Easter egg hunts with the big Easter egg bunny, fucking Halloween parties with the great pumpkin, all kinds of stuff. And hearing all that in a way kind of bums me out because, you could tell there was a lot of people there who were clearly trying to make Pennhurst this desirable place to live, this desirable place for people to stay, who are intellectually, disabled, and it just didn't work out. It just, the vision did not last, and it's sad that it became such a sad place to be. They just didn't know, their heart was in the right place, they just didn't know how to make life consistently good for those people. Maybe they could have figured it all out if they would have had access to a little more knowledge provided by today's sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. Yes, Timesuck is brought to you again today by The Great Courses Plus. Build a better brain with The Great Courses Plus. There's wonderful courses in critical thinking, courses in learning about learning. So many cool history courses coming up. We have a suck on Spartacus coming up right around the corner. I say coming up; they're there now. All the stuff is there now, so I got to clarify that. It's gonna be a wild ride through Rome's gladiator days here pretty soon on the Suck, though. And with The Great Courses Plus, you can prep. You can visit the newly finished Roman amphitheater circa 80 CE, where the Emperor Titus would celebrate the consolidation of his family's dynasty by hosting 100 days of gladiatorial games. Bloodthirsty, vicious, the spectacle is captivating. After learning about the Colosseum's engineering, you can experience what it was like to be there for the games. This is just one of the many presentations on Rome provided by Professor Robert Garland. It's an awesome primer, incredible companion piece to our upcoming Spartacus Timesuck. And you'll love this. You'll love so many other courses. I use them on the regular for my research now, man. And with the Great Courses Plus, we've arranged a special limited time offer for our Timesuckers. Sign up for a free month of unlimited access to all the lectures at thegreatcoursesplus.com/timesuck. That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/timesuck. Start your free month link to the thegreatcoursesplus.com/timesuck in the episode description. All right. 1913. Pennsylvania legislature, partially in response to concerns raised by the Pennhurst Board of Trustees, appointed a commission for the care of the feeble-minded. The commission's conclusions included a statement that the feeble-minded were unfit for citizenship and they posed a menace to the peace of society. They recommended a program of custodial care to break the endless reproductive chain. Many were placed in the care of Pennhurst, removed from society, sometimes for decades. None of the patients were free to leave, and regardless of IQ level, they were treated as children their whole lives, referred to as children their whole lives. Unpaid labor is provided by the committed. It becomes essential to the survival of the institution. They become a slave labor, forced to work at the facility. Work boys and, quote, work girls were found in every part of the facility, patients providing care for other patients many times, working in the custodial department, in the laundry, the kitchen, housekeeping, maintenance facilities. The board started making some money off this place. They reported a profit of more than $50,000 for the farming operation of a 2-year period ending in May 1926. Adjusted for inflation, the $50,000 in earnings will be equivalent to more than $650,000 today. In 1921, 1922, the institution laundry processed nearly 1.7 million pieces of clothing, bedding, and other goods. This mountain of work was completed by 4 paid employees and 40 quote-unquote patients. So, they had a lot of people being forced to work there. In 1918, Pennhurst was billed as a world apart from the rest of society, both to keep the feeble-minded from the public, also to end the intermixing of their genes with the population. And I keep hinting around at it. Yeah, this is that whole eugenics thing. Part of what I was touching on earlier, that by keeping the intellectually disabled and criminals from breeding, the thought was you could end crime. This was a serious notion in the early 20th century. There was this belief that certain personality traits could and should be bred out of the population. Or rather, no longer be allowed to continue to be bred into the population. Everyone wants to talk about Hitler when it comes to eugenics or forced sterilization program, but there was a lot of talk at high levels of society and government about enacting eugenics laws in America in the early 20th century as well. It got really popular in the 1920s, 1930s, but it started before that. There was actually a film called The Black Stork. Early film came out in 1917, supposedly based on a true story. It depicted a heroic doctor that allowed a syphilitic infant to die after convincing the child's parents that it was better to spare society one more outcast. That's a fucking movie. Are people clapping at that part? Bravo. Good for him. Let the baby die. The American Eugenics Society was founded in the 1920s. The term eugenics was first coined by Englishman Francis Galton in the mid-1800s. Galton was an intellectual whose body of work spanned many fields, including statistics, psychology, meteorology, genetics. Incidentally, he was also the half-cousin of Charles Darwin. I've heard of him. Galton's first academic foray into eugenics analyzed the characteristics, such as superior intelligence, of England's upper classes and concluded they were hereditary, therefore desirable traits that could be passed down through generations. Galton advocated a selective breeding program for humans in his book Hereditary Genius, saying consequently, as it is easy to obtain by careful selection a permanent breed of dogs or horses gifted with peculiar powers of running or of doing anything else, so it would be quite practical to produce a highly gifted race of men by judicious marriages during several consecutive generations. Now, obviously, this whole kind of notion was tainted very much. The well was poisoned very strongly when Hitler got a hold of this information. It was like, yeah, that's how we get the white master race going. As I yell that, I again think about the neighbors in the building that could maybe only hear me say that. You know, they just hear like mumbling, and then they hear me scream white master race. Like, fuck. Or worse, they're like, hell yeah, exactly. Okay, so Pennhurst becomes part of this movement. The sexes were separated on the Pennhurst campus to keep people from reproducing, was a large part of that. In the biennial report to the legislature submitted by the Board of Trustees, Pennhurst chief physician quotes Dr. Henry Goddard, a leading eugenist, as follows, saying, every feeble-minded person is a potential criminal. This is the main doctor at Pennhurst. The quote was used to support the argument for an expansion of the institution. It goes on to say, the general public, although more convinced today than ever before, that it is a good thing to segregate the idiot or the distinct imbecile, they have not as yet been convinced as to the proper treatment of the defective delinquent, which is the brighter and more dangerous individual. It is now generally understood that feeble-mindedness is in the great majority of instances the direct result of hereditary transmission of mental defect. It is also known that the feeble-minded female is very likely to bear children, and that these children are almost certain to be defective or in some way permanently dependent. The feeble-minded girl is more of a menace to society than the feeble-minded boy. Statistics show that feeble-minded girls and boys marry in the ratio of 3 to 1. It would seem, therefore, that if the state is not adequately equipped to care for all of the feeble-minded girl should have institutional care in preference to the boy, since she is the greater menace. Fucked up language, man. Fucked up language here. Super insulting. Again, forced sterilization never caught on as a real political or scientific movement in this country since it died out after the world saw what Hitler's eugenic movement looked like. However, in the cases of certain people who are truly incapable of raising their own children, I don't necessarily, I know this is not a popular opinion, I don't necessarily disagree with some kind of mandatory sterilization in some sense. I mean, I do have a fucking bit on mandatory sterilization in one of my stand-up specials. And hear me out. I'm not going fucking Hitler. Not going Hitler or anybody. This has nothing to do with race. To me, it has to do with common sense and trying to prevent the most senseless tragedy you can. And let me tell you a story about why I have this belief. All right? This comes from personal experience. While I cannot recall her name, there was a woman I supervised child visits for at Child Protective Services back in Spokane, Washington many years ago, a woman I'll never forget. She was only allowed to see her kids a few times a month. I believe it was twice a month for an hour and a half, 90 minutes at a time, and only at the local CPS offices where we had visitation rooms. Little rooms with a few toys, few chairs, and a big window so anyone walking down the hall, usually an actual social worker, I was just an intern, could peek in. My horrible job was to sit in one of the chairs in one of these little rooms with the clipboard, sit in there, with, the kid or kids and the parent or parents, and take notes on the visitation. Take notes on the visitation while the visit was happening. Was the parent engaged with the child? Did the child seem responsive to the parent? Did the child seem like they wanted to be there? Did the child seem like they wanted the parent to be there? Was the child happy when the parent showed up for the visit? Was the child sad when they left? It was a fucking terrible job. that will haunt me on some level forever. Felt like I was sitting in a big pit of fucking sadness and despair. I got to share hour after hour some of the saddest moments of these families' lives. The kids would be driven to our offices by whatever relative they were living with, or foster parent, or social worker, or employee of some group home where they were staying. A lot of tears shed in those visits by a lot of people, and it was always hardest on the kids. The kids either loved their parents dearly and didn't want the visit to end and have to be sent back to whatever home or facility they were staying at, or the kids were furious with or hated their parents and didn't want to see them at all. So you either felt terrible for the parent or parents, or terrible for the kid or kids, or sad for fucking everyone. It was just a lose situation. And anyway, this one woman, her visits and visitation rights made no sense to me. She was allowed to see her kid, the kid that I was supervising the visits for, but she was never going to be allowed to bring him home. Not ever. She'd never be allowed to be in a room, alone with her kid. And why? Because she was a convicted level 3 sex offender. I do not remember the exact nature of the molestation charge against her. I do remember that she had been molested herself, and that it was an instance of her acting out on a very young child, like under the age of 2. And I also don't remember her coming across as a predator. She came across as someone who didn't understand why it was wrong to behave sexually with a child. And why didn't she understand? Because she was very intellectually disabled. She was very cognitively impaired. She had an IQ, I think somewhere down in the 50s. She lived on disability money. And the kid she was visiting wasn't her only kid. I found out she had several. Her social worker, a man named Sivu, told me that she had a kid every year or two. She's probably 30 when I met her. And that every time she had another kid, it was taken from the hospital, from the neonatal unit, at the hospital, placed in a group home immediately due to the combination of her sex offender status and her intellectual disability. So, not illegal for her to get pregnant, but illegal for her to keep her own baby and raise it. So I asked, why doesn't the state sterilize her? To me, that made the most sense in this particular situation. And honestly, it still fucking does. And Sivu looked at me like my name was Adolf Hitler. And he talked about how that can never happen because of the history of the Nazis' eugenics program and essentially the inherent immorality of a eugenics program in general. But I wonder, what is more inhumane? What's more immoral? Forcing an American citizen to be sterilized, or placing one baby after another into foster care, babies that you could prevent being put into that system? What seemed immoral to me was allowing this woman to keep having kids, that she would sometimes be allowed to visit, which I still don't fucking understand, and that she'd never be allowed to raise. What kind of sense does that make? To me, forced sterilization in some cases is the most moral thing you can do to prevent future human suffering. It's not right to send more babies into an overburdened foster and adoption system, when it can be easily avoided. And not a popular opinion, I know, but I do think it has some logic to it. I do imagine also, I do know the most logical, I fail some of you being like, nah, here's why we can't do this. And I will address this. I imagine the most logical argument against it is the slippery slope argument, which is in this instance, if you legislate forced sterilization in this particular situation, then it could end up being carried out in a similar situation, but maybe not quite as black and white. And then in another similar situation, similar to the previous one, not as obvious, less obvious, and it just keeps becoming less and less obvious, and it keeps going so on and so forth until eventually sterilizations are being carried out in morally ambiguous or morally questionable or morally reprehensible situations, like when someone who just can't, maybe can't clearly afford to have another child, but might be able to in the future. And suddenly, fucking Third Reich, here we are all over again. Okay, so maybe Sivu was right to tell me that my idea was bad in that sense. It might be best in that one situation, but it could then be later used in situations it shouldn't be able to be used in. So, damn it. No easy solutions, man. No easy solutions is the theme of this suck today. Okay, so in 1930, the first buildings on the upper campus, known as the female colony, are completed at Pennhurst. Also in 1930, another labor training facility is opened. The chief physician stating that the manual training department is a place of interest to the boys. They are taught the names, uses, and care of tools, learn to handle them properly by daily practice. They first make simple articles requiring no joints, such as match scratchers, coat hangers, etc. And after that, they've mastered the rudiments of fitting and joining. They can handle their tools with ease. They are allowed to make small tables, chairs, stools, etc. And then a lot of these things would be sold. Many beautiful and useful articles, again, made for sale to visitors and relatives. Profit going to the Children's Amusement Fund, which would purchase luxuries such as Easter eggs, Christmas gifts, party prizes, which again is cool, but also kind of bums me out, man, that they had to, make furniture so they could have Christmas gifts. It's fucking sad. Also at the age of 14, the female students would attend the home economic department. At the completion of this course, each girl would be capable of preparing and serving a complete meal. There would be beneficial training such as pressing, mending, and sewing. So again, clearly some people trying to make life as nice as possible for the patients at Pennhurst. Long before Baldini showed up with his investigative cameras. It just, it wasn't always terrible. It wasn't terrible in theory. Staffing was an issue early on at Pennhurst. For the first 50 years of its existence, the majority of Pennhurst employees were required to live on campus. Yeah, I bet that hurt recruiting a little bit. In the early years, the lack of suitable housing was often cited as one of the reasons why it was hard to hire and keep staff. Yeah, of course, you just, hey, you should apply at Pennhurst, man. Pay is good. Hours aren't that bad. They provide housing. Oh, that's cool. Where do they put you up? I didn't think Pennhurst was near any towns. I thought it was the middle of nowhere. Yeah, they put you up in Pennhurst. It's not bad. You get used to it. After a while, you can kind of barely hear the screams and cries at night when you're trying to fall asleep. Yeah, sounds like a nightmare. An informational booklet sent out in the 1940s reveals continued overcrowding at Pennhurst, saying the patient population is at present approximately 2,400, with a waiting list of nearly 1,500. And that's hundreds over capacity. Boys and girls are equally divided, live in two separate colonies. Children are admitted between the ages of 6 and 16. In the 1940s, also a dark side of Pennhurst begins to grow. There were two Pennhursts from the beginning. The legislature created them, when they directed that the building shall be in two groups, which we said earlier. There's that educational and industrial department, and then there's that custodial and asylum department. There was some public awareness of the educational and industrial department, but very little public awareness of the other departments. Very little photos come from that era. Basically, all the kind of promo for the facility would be from the educational and industrial department, which is people who are a little higher functioning. That's where all the baseball teams and all the, kids doing different activities and stuff. That's where they were staying. The other part, the custodial or asylum department, was kind of invisible because, it had become incredibly fucking sad. It had become a nightmare for patients to be due to chronic neglect and understaffing. Basically the patients housed in the custodial department were thought to be too intellectually disabled to be able to be educated or to be able to contribute in any kind of work fashioned at the institution, so they were just kind of left to rot, neglected. Much and much less staff would be devoted to their care. Their buildings would be the last to be repaired or any kind of funding given to them, and the quarters began to fall into just disgusting disrepair that would just get worse as time goes on. That we'll talk about in some kind of court testimony that I'll mention later from when the place eventually gets sued and shut down. In 1955, the in-house population of Pennhurst peaks at 3,500 individuals. It's like over 1,500 beyond capacity. 2 annexes of the facility are opened in former tuberculosis sanitariums. Hundreds of residents are transferred to these new facilities. And the availability of this additional capacity allows for the population to then grow to 4,100 individuals, with 3,200 by 1961 living in the kind of core part of the facility. By 1967, it's not uncommon for no more than 2 attendants to be assigned to a residence housing up to 100 individuals. That's not a good ratio, 2 to 100. The actual care and supervision of the residents many times is carried out by patients themselves, by those work boys and work girls. And then in 1968, Baldini shows up. Right before he gets in trouble for Baldini's weenie. No, I got to stop saying that. This guy was an amazing guy. But I want you to take that away from the episode. But he shows up, does his expose. Numerous newspaper articles, legislative inquiries, and other investigations follow. There had also been a number of ones, that had already happened, before this expose. But things just kept getting kind of swept under the rug. People would get outraged for a second, and then things would go back to, normal, quote unquote, at Pennhurst. In 1971, the Pennsylvania chapter of the ARC, an advocacy organization for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, files a lawsuit against the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. In 1972, the lawsuit is settled, and it establishes the right to attend public schools to all children with intellectual disabilities and for them to no longer be shunned, because children with intellectual disabilities prior to this in Pennsylvania had been excluded from public school, even if they weren't staying in an institution like Pennhurst. They weren't allowed to go to school. On May 30th, 1974, the landmark civil rights case, Halderman versus Pennhurst State School, is filed in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania by a mother of a Pennhurst resident. The case would eventually reach the U.S. Supreme Court and be assigned District Judge Raymond Broderick. The United States of America moved to intervene as a plaintiff in the Halderman case. Excerpts from the facts section of the federal district court case demonstrate the horrific conditions that lack of funding created at Pennhurst. You know, it was only through the dedication of the overworked staff, it seemed, that any humanity at all was afforded to people in this institution. Let's talk about some of these experts. This is the court experts of what was going on there, and this is this isn't that long ago. This is in the early 70s. It said no psychologists are on duty at Pennhurst at night or over the weekend. Thus, if a resident has an emotional crisis, he or she may go without treatment until the next morning or until the weekend is over. At Pennhurst, restraints are used as control measures in lieu of adequate staffing. Restraints can either be physical or chemical. The physical restraints range from placing the individual into a seclusion room to binding the person's hands or ankles with muffs or posies, binding the individual to a bed or to a bear. That would be a fucking weird turn. People were outraged because a lot of the patients were being strapped to bears. They had several black bears and 2 grizzlies. The grizzlies were used in extreme cases, and when a patient really acted out, they were strapped to a bear, and they're like, all right, well, now you get to fucking spend 12 hours on a grizzly's back. That is insane. No, they were bound to beds or chairs. Chemical restraints were, be like psychotropic medication, tranquilization. Other physical restraints could be used due to staff shortages. An extreme example is a female resident who, during the month of June 1976, was physically restrained for 651 total hours and 5 minutes. For the month of August, she was in physical restraints for 720 hours. During September, 674 hours, 20 minutes. During the month of October, 647 hours. So a lot of hours. This resident was so extremely self-destructive that she totally blinded herself. She was not enrolled in any occupational therapy until early 1977. Once initiated there, her programming has apparently been quite successful. She's now able to be out of restraints for as much as 4 hours a day. Had this programming been initiated earlier, her self-inflicted injuries might have been avoided or at least lessened. Now, this one to me sounds a little nitpicky, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to explain why. I mean, yeah, they can look in hindsight and be like, yeah, man, once they found this worked, she didn't have to be restrained as much. Why weren't they doing that earlier? Well, because they didn't fucking know that it would work. She was an incredibly violent to herself person who was severely mentally disabled and was trying to hurt herself all the time. And yeah, they fucking tied her up because they didn't know what else to do. Is that the staff's fault? Is it the staff's fault that somebody, was born with disabilities so severe they're prone to attacking themselves so viciously that they fucking blind themselves? That is so horrific. But I mean, seriously, life is not fair. If someone is born with a strong desire to, to run out to the edge of a cliff and then throw themselves off of it, and your responsibility is to keep them from not doing that, and you do so by, tying them up or maybe bolting the door or something, then there's like this huge portion of society that I feel like is going to cry out in outrage, be like, how dare you imprison that human being like an animal, you monster. And then, then you can be like, okay, all right, fuck it. All right, let them go. Let them run where they want. And then the person runs out the door and throws himself off a cliff, and then the same people are going to cry out again. What were you thinking letting him go? You should have tied him up for his own good. It does feel like, I feel bad for a lot of the staff at Pennhurst where they were just in a no-win situation. They were just, short-staffed, forced to, try and do their best to take care of a very hard-to-take-care-of population of people. The report goes on saying seclusion rooms have been used to punish aggressive behavior. And these are all, these are all like examples of like, how dare they do this? This says one 18-year-old individual spent 6 consecutive days in seclusion in 1974 for assaulting a Down syndrome resident. And again, weird citation of things being horrible. A weird example, at Pennhurst. It's like, how dare you put that young man in solitary for 6 whole days? Motherfucker, he just beat the shit out of somebody who has Down syndrome. What are we supposed to do? Tell him in a firm voice to stop punching other people in the face a bunch? Jimmy, what do we say about punching people in the face hard and often? What are you supposed to do? It says the physical environment at Pennhurst is hazardous to the residents, both psychologically and physically. There is often excrement and urine on ward floors, and the living areas don't meet minimal professional standards for cleanliness. Outbreaks of pinworms and infectious disease are common. Okay, this seems pretty hard to defend. I got to say, this complaint seems to be very valid. That's about, you got to clean the floors. People should not have to live in a place covered in pinworm-infested shit. That seems pretty fixable. But again, probably due to short staff. It says there is not adequate space for the residents. The living areas do not provide privacy for those persons who can handle privacy. There does not seem to be adequate activity areas or program areas or even general activity areas within the general living area or even adequate activity program areas away from the home living area. I love all that legal speak. So severe overcrowding. Again, valid complaint. The environment at Pennhurst is not only not conducive to learning new skills, but it is so poor that it contributes to losing skills already learned. For example, Pennhurst has a toilet training program, but one who has successfully completed the program may not be able to practice their newly learned skill and therefore are likely to use it. Yeah, that complaint seems pretty valid as well. Once you learn how to use a toilet, you should be able to continue to have access to a toilet. Not sure what the hell was going on, keeping people from toilets. Again, probably severe overcrowding. That sounds very sad to me. Then they say most toilet areas do not have towels, soap, or toilet paper, and the bathroom facilities are often filthy and in a state of disrepair. Obnoxious odors and excessive noise permeate the atmosphere at Pennhurst. Such conditions are not conducive to habilitation. Moreover, the noise level in the day rooms is often so high that many residents simply stop speaking. Yeah, okay. No soap or toilet paper in the bathrooms on the reg. That is super fucked up. I feel like that problem is, strongly linked to the shit covering the floors situation. A little toilet paper, a little bit of soap might, kind of knock out both problems. Mama Ridgway would have lost her shit at Pennhurst over all the shit other people were losing. So many filthy weens needing to be cleaned. Mama Ridgway would have come down with carpal tunnel after just a few days, which is all the ween cleaning she would have been doing. Man, though, that is terrible. I mean, we've all used a gross bathroom. Like we've all been traveling, and you've walked into. I've walked into a place a few times, even where I've really had to go. Where I'm like, I can't. No, I'm not going in there. I am not. I do not. That's when you know a place is dirty, when you don't feel comfortable taking a shit in a place. And this bathroom just sounds like basically like the worst a bathroom could be. Like at this point, it's not really a bathroom. It's just a room. It's just an area. It's just a physical location that you just shit in, like an animal. That's terrible. Injuries to residents or by other residents are common. It says through self-abuse. For example, on January 8th, 1975. Oh, not just through self-abuse. Check this out. It says by January 8th, 1975, one individual bit off 3/4 of the earlobe and part of the outer ear of another resident while that second resident was asleep, that sounds so horrific to me because, either you're severely drugged up and I guess you don't feel it, and then you wake up with part of your ear being chewed off, or you've been restrained, which I think is the more likely, sadly, the more likely scenario. You do feel it, you're restrained, and you can there's somebody's face right next to your face, and they're nibbling your ear off. That's some Stephen King shit. About the same period, one resident pushed a second resident to the floor off a higher floor, resulting in the death of the second resident. Such residents' abuse continues. In January 1977 alone, says there was 833 minor and 25 major injuries reported. And that is clearly terrible. 25 major injuries in 1 month. Very bad. Clearly a staffing problem. Need more staff, need more vigilant staff. A lot of bad decisions being made. In addition, there is staff abuse of residents. In 1976, one resident was raped by a staff person. One resident was badly bruised when a staff person hit him with a set of keys. Another resident was thrown several feet across the room by a staff person. One resident was hit by a staff person with a shackle belt. On each occasion, an investigation was conducted, and the staff person responsible was suspended and or terminated. I'm hoping, in addition to be suspended and or terminated, the rape person was criminally prosecuted. What the fuck? I'm hoping that just goes without saying. Maybe that was brought up in a different, segment of court testimony. To me, that is, a little more than a workplace violation. Just, all right, Steve, I got the results of your 6-month review in, and look, we're going to start with the positive. We love that you're punctual. Love that you dot all your I's. Love that you cross all your T's on your daily patient assessments. A lot of good qualities. However, what we do not care for is the raping. We don't like it. We really hoped that you would stop raping after we suspended you last year, and now I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go. We're going to have to fire you. It's just you're terminated. It's too much raping. So, Jesus, many of the many of the residents have suffered physical deterioration, intellectual and behavioral regression during their residency at Pennhurst. Terry Lee Halderman, the original plaintiff in the action, was admitted to Pennhurst in 1966 when she was 12 years of age. And it says during her 11 years at Pennhurst, as a result of attacks and accidents, she has lost several teeth, suffered a fractured jaw, fractured fingers, had a fractured toe, numerous lacerations, cuts, scratches, and bites. Prior to her admission to Pennhurst, Terry Lee could say, Dada, Mama, No, Baba, and Nana. She no longer speaks at all. Fuck. So yes, I get the lawsuit completely now. This one seems exceptionally bad. That's a lot of fractures. That is a lot of fractures. Wish they had some notes as to how she received some of them. She may not be able to communicate, though. Why? I mean, that's a sad part of this. You know, if she can't communicate, she couldn't tell people what had actually happened to her. They just would see bite marks on her body or, whatever, or, fractured bones and know that something had happened to her as a result of either violence to herself or probably more likely violence from others. So, Scott, it's like, was anybody paying attention to what was going on there? I mean, they were actually, but again, if there's not enough staff to handle all this overcrowding, what can you do? They needed more funding. They needed more staff. It says plaintiff Robert Height, born in 1965, was admitted to Pennhurst in September 1974, placed on a ward with 45 other residents. His parents visited him 2.5 weeks after his admission and found that already he was badly bruised, his mouth was cut, he was heavily drugged, and didn't recognize his mother. On this visit, the Heights observed 25 residents walking the ward naked, others partially dressed. During this short period of time, Robert had lost skills that he had possessed prior to his admission, and the Heights promptly removed Robert from the institution. Mrs. Height commenting that she would not leave a dog in conditions like that. Fuck. Yeah, this complaint seems pretty bad too. A lot of bad stuff happened. This is terrible. It says approximately 21 of the 45 living units at Pennhurst are locked to prevent individuals from leaving their living units. Those individuals over the age of 18 who have been quote-unquote voluntarily admitted to Pennhurst are theoretically free to leave the institution at any time. Those admitted on the petition of their parents are informed by their caseworker when they reach the age of 18, they don't have to remain at Pennhurst. If the residents state that they wish to leave the institution and the staff determines that there is no place for them in the community or believes that the individuals are not ready to go into the community, the staff can petition the court to have the individuals committed to the institution by the court. Furthermore, those residents who either do not understand their alternatives or are physically unable to indicate they wish to leave Pennhurst will be deemed to have consented to their continued placement at the institution. Thus, the notion of voluntariness in connection with admission, as well as in connection with the right to leave Pennhurst, is an illusory concept. Few, if any, residents now have, nor did they have at the time of their admission, any adequate alternative to their institutionalization. As a practical matter, Pennhurst was and is their only alternative. Nearly all the parents of Pennhurst residents who testified stated that they placed their children in Pennhurst only as a last resort, and had there been community facilities or aid programs, their children would not have been placed at Pennhurst. So this complaint seems aimed more at society in general than it was at Pennhurst. And I'm going to put a pin in that thought, and we're going to come back to that after the timeline. It's about to wrap up here. On October 4th, 1975, the Federal Developmental Disabilities Assistance and Bill of Rights Act is signed into law. It establishes finally a system for protection and advocacy organizations in each state, enumerates certain rights for people with intellectual disabilities, a major step in the right direction for the advancement of the rights of the disabled. On November 29th, 1975, the Federal Education for All Handicapped Children Act is signed into law. From April 1st, 1977 through June 1st, 1977, Halderman versus Pennhurst is tried. The Honorable Raymond J. Broderick rules in favor of the residents, declaring that forced institutionalization of people with disabilities is unconstitutional. The district court determined that Pennhurst provided such a dangerous, miserable environment for its residents that many of them actually suffered physical deterioration and intellectual regression during their stay in the institution. And then Pennhurst, there was a Pennhurst longitudinal study conducted between 1979 and 1985, found that Pennhurst residents who moved to the community would be better off in every way that we know how to measure. Before the relocation of residents, 60% of families of Pennhurst residents opposed the residents leaving Pennhurst. 6 months after relocation, more than 80% of the same families came to agree that relocation had been the right decision. June 18, 1982, the U.S. Supreme Court rules in the case of Romeo versus Youngberg that the Constitution imparts a right to minimally adequate treatment for people involuntarily committed to state institutions. The court defines the rights of such involuntarily committed persons to a right to be free from unreasonably bodily restraints and to a reasonably safe environment and whatever minimal training might be required to protect those interests. Romeo versus Youngberg was filed by the mother of an individual who received serious injuries after his commitment to Pennhurst. The defendants had prevailed at trial, but the trial results were overturned by the Third Circuit Court, which ordered a new trial to be held, and that case was settled before another trial was scheduled. And then in 1984, the final settlement agreement between the Haldeman versus Pennhurst parties provides for the closure of Pennhurst. And then a portion of Pennhurst property is repurposed as a residential home for Pennsylvania veterans in 86. And then on December 9th, 1987, the Pennhurst State School and Hospital is officially, completely, and totally shut down forever. Then October 2010, years later, to the shock and dismay of many, especially those in the disability community, the now privately owned Pennhurst, it's kind of, I guess, it'd be called an estate now, is turned into a Halloween attraction. Randy Bates, the Bates Motel Halloween attraction owner, turns Pennhurst's historic lower campus into a commercial haunted kind of insane asylum type attraction. And with that, we will leave today's Timesuck timeline.
Good job, soldier. You made it back. Barely.
So, this suck was not what I expected. First off, I'll be honest. I thought Pennhurst was an insane asylum. I had no idea it was a home for the intellectually disabled. And I was surprised by my reaction to a lot of the material. I definitely didn't have a fuck those people at Pennhurst for not taking better care of the patients a lot of the time. And Baldini didn't either. He realized the problem was a lot bigger than that. Pennhurst didn't fail because of the staff. It failed because of society. It was never built to succeed. It wasn't built for the right reasons. It wasn't given a proper staff. They didn't put enough money into it. And why? Because, why did all this happen? Well, because a lot of families felt that they had family members who were too hard to take care of themselves. So, are those families at fault as much as Pennhurst was for the treatment of the patients? No, I don't think so. Pennhurst was supposed to be able to take care of their patients, but it didn't. And why didn't it? Again, because it didn't have proper funding. And why didn't it have proper funding? Well, because not enough tax money was allocated to funding Pennhurst. And why wasn't enough money allocated? Well, because the care of the intellectually disabled was not and is not, frankly, a cultural priority. It's gotten better since 1968, since Baldini's report, a report aired, interestingly, the same year that the Special Olympics were founded by Eunice Kennedy Shriver, sister of JFK, mother of Maria Shriver. Pennhurst has been closed for years now, but are things better for the intellectually disabled today? I would think overall, but in many ways, not. For a lot of people, widespread abuse does continue. I came across a November 21st, 2016 article in the Chicago Tribune called "Suffering in Secret." Illinois hides abuse and neglect of adults with disabilities. The article says the house had no address, the dead man had no name. Illinois officials blacked out those details from their investigative report. Nobody else was supposed to learn the man's identity or the location of the state-funded facility where his body was found. The investigation was closed as it began with no public disclosure, and the report was filed away, one of thousands that portray a hidden world of misery and harm. And again, this is 2016. No one would know that Thomas Powers died at 3300 Essington Road in unincorporated Joliet in a group home managed for adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities. Or that his caregivers forced a 50-year-old man with the intellect of a small child to sleep on a soiled mattress on the floor in a room used for storage. Or that the front door bore a building inspection sticker that warned not approved for occupancy. Not even Powers' grieving family knew the state had looked into his death and found evidence of neglect. As Illinois steers thousands of low-income adults with disabilities into private group homes, a Tribune investigation found Powers was but one of many casualties in a botched strategy to save money and give some of the state's poorest and most vulnerable residents a better life. The first comprehensive accounting of mistreatment inside Illinois' taxpayer-funded group homes and their day programs, the Tribune uncovered a system where caregivers often failed to provide basic care while regulators cloaked harm and death with secrecy and silence. The Tribune identified 1,311 cases of documented harm since July 2011, hundreds more cases than publicly reported by the Illinois Department of Human Services. Confronted with those findings, Human Services officials retracted 5 years of erroneous reports and said the department had launched reforms to ensure accurate reporting. So yeah, that doesn't sound better than Pennhurst at all. Shit's still being kind of hidden. Bad things still happening. Earlier this year, 2018, NPR reported that people with intellectual disabilities are victims of some of the highest rates of sexual assault in the nation. NPR found previously undisclosed government numbers. And again, it's a sad theme here that both these things were, undisclosed government numbers, showing that people with intellectual disabilities are assaulted at 7 times the rate of people without those disabilities. 7 times the rate of assault. Jessica Oppenheim of the Arc of New Jersey, an advocacy group, says people with intellectual disabilities live an isolated life and it makes them more likely to be victimized. Let's face it, she adds, offenders are going to look for an easier target and someone who doesn't feel they have the right to say anything, someone who may not understand what their rights are, someone who's not comfortable or maybe is even afraid to say anything makes for an easier target. So how do we fix things? Well, the American Psychological Association has a lot of thought about this problem, or has thought a lot about this problem. It has some insights regarding how to try and fix it. They say the APA has recognized the urgent need for more data. The association makes a number of recommendations, including the creation of a national strategy to collect data, more investment in research, greater development of evidence-based prevention and intervention methods. While more research is sorely needed, psychologists can't ignore the problem until more data rolls in. All mental health professionals should assess for abuse people with intellectual disabilities. This means asking clients, patients about types of abuse that aren't always obvious. When people with disabilities are in abusive situations, psychologists have to consider their unique needs as they help them develop safety plans and escape plans. Many domestic violence shelters, for instance, aren't accessible to someone with a wheelchair, someone with certain medical needs. People in shelters might not know sign language or be able to accommodate a person with visual impairments. These barriers can make it difficult for people with various disabilities to flee an abusive situation. Psychologists can also help by taking a proactive approach to help clients avoid abusive situations. For example, they can help parents of disabled children seek support and learn coping strategies to manage their frustrations so that the child doesn't end up in a potentially dangerous situation. In addition, psychologists can help people with disabilities learn to advocate for themselves and find ways to communicate when something's wrong. Meanwhile, disability advocates say the fields of healthcare, social work, and psychology should do more to teach trainees about disability issues, including intellectual disabilities, raise awareness of the risk of violence towards this population. One place to start is to open the doors to people who walk in those shoes. Psychology needs to become a lot more welcoming of people with disabilities. So, sounds like what we need to do is not send them away and pretend they don't exist. They need proper treatment. We need to find out what that treatment is. Find out how to take care of them better and better as we go forward. But then there's this other problem of who is going to cover that. When I think of this problem, I think of people who complain about their school system being shitty. But then this is one of probably many examples I could use. But then when a tax levy is proposed to increase their taxes to pay for more teachers and better conditions at the school system that they're complaining about, they voted down. Which is fucking ridiculous. But that kind of stuff happens all the time. But if we want this issue fixed, we're going to have to throw some money at it. We're going to have to pay for proper care for the less fortunate. Unlike when Pennhurst was founded, education exists now for how to care for the intellectually disabled. Now we know how to do it, but that doesn't mean we are doing it, or at least we know a lot, how to do it a lot better. We know how to care for epileptics, the deaf, the blind, the paralyzed, people with all kinds of disabilities who used to be sent to Pennhurst or places like Pennhurst. I think, for their safety and health and to prevent some additional tragedy, I do think maybe, just maybe, we could talk about maybe some sterilization happening. I know, it's not a fucking popular one. I'm not going to get a lot of support on that front. I've had that conversation many times over the course of my adult life, and pretty consistently my thoughts are met with looks of disgust and horror. It's fine. So what else can we do? We can start caring about the intellectually disabled, and we can volunteer our time or money to help those who need a little more help than the rest of us. I looked into some charities, that help people with intellectual disabilities. The one that seemed the coolest to me that I found, doing a little bit of research, is called Advancing Opportunities. Advancing Opportunities has a mission to drive independent living for individuals with disabilities. All of their services are person-centered. One especially unique service lends free assistive technology to adults that require some help with tasks like college assignments or recovering from memory loss. Yet another incredible resource for adults with disabilities is their employment program that provides resume building and training on new tasks. Advancing Opportunities strives to be one agency for all disabilities, and they do other things beyond that with people with more severe intellectual disabilities. Link in the episode description if you want to learn more about him or donate. It's advopps.org. And I guess nothing we can do, is not look down on him, And in this regard, compared to when I was a kid, things do seem to be changing a lot for the better. Society does seem to be moving in a good direction. And, part of me saying that comes from the research I did for this week's Idiots of the Internet, where I actually found some inspiration. Let's check it out.
Idiots of the Internet.
ABC has a hidden camera show that I've never watched, but I've watched a lot of clips of it called What Would You Do? If you haven't seen it, it's they create socially uncomfortable situations out in public to see how strangers will react. They might have an actor or actress, say something like overtly racist or threaten domestic violence or, steal something to see if anyone around, notices and intervenes. And just this past May, they posted a video of a very sweet, very friendly, intellectually disabled man with Down syndrome named Peter. And Peter's trying to order food at a little restaurant when an actor starts harassing him, telling him he's holding everybody up, asking if he can order first before this guy, mocking him, saying he's too slow, to be ordering, saying he can't probably read anyway. Why is he looking at the menu? Referring to him loudly that he is, quote, retarded, that he shouldn't be left out in public alone, etc. Lots of horrible shit. And time after time in this video, strangers come to Peter's defense and essentially tell this guy to get out of the restaurant and go fuck himself. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But I was afraid still to look in the comment section. I expected a troll fest in the comment thread under this video that has almost 5 million views since May 24th. I just think about my own childhood and all the terms that were thrown around and, the horrible things that would be said about people with intellectual disabilities. And I expected those things to pop up in the comment thread, and I was wrong. Amazing Thomas posts, I don't give a crap that guy's an actor. I'd shoot him in the side of his head. Savannah Jala posts, love you guys, and she gets over 700 thumbs up and then tons of love you too replies. John Allen posts, I want that Down syndrome guy as my friend. He is so cute. Chloe Hughes posts, I feel bad for Peter, even if he is an actor, because he must go through that all the time in real life. Frowny face. I had to scroll down through hundreds and hundreds of comments before I found anything that even hinted slightly negative. I think that's the first time that's ever happened on any of these sucks where I've done that. Eventually, of course, you get a video with this many views, you're gonna have a couple assholes, but it took me forever to find the first one, and it wasn't as harsh as I expected it to be. Honestly, it messed up. But Roman Reigns 619 posts, Peter has screwed up teeth. That's what he posts. And I will say that Roman Reigns has a cartoon drawing of some WWE dude as his avatar. So I'm guessing he's about 10 years old. And immediately the first replies to his post are, screw you. And you're just like the guy who's insulting Peter, screw you. And since they're saying screw instead of fuck, I feel like it's other little kids putting Roman in his place. I like it. Hail Nimrod. And shut the fuck up, Roman Reigns, you shitty little asshole. Tons more nice comments follow. So many more nice comments. You have to go down like another 100 or so more before you find a user who stole my socks who posts, never understood why people with Down syndrome have the worst haircuts, which, is mildly not cool. And then Stephen Jobs, obvious troll, replies, because they're too stupid to get a good one. And then the other users fucking tear him apart immediately. All replies just so angry towards him. None more so than Kanashi Nico, who posts, quote, Stephen Jobs, fuck you, cock dick balls, bitch ass whore, retarded shithead fucking motherfucker. All caps. Okay. Probably should have left out the word retarded in that rant and in all other rants, Kanashi. But I do support your intent. I do support the rest of the vocab you use wholeheartedly. Then hundreds and hundreds of other super kind comments in a row. One of my favorites is user Silver Dollar, who posts, Peter is not retarded or mentally challenged or any of that. He's a customer at a restaurant trying to enjoy a meal. How beautiful is that if you really think about it? Why do we have to define him by his intellectual ability? Why can't he just be a fucking dude wanting a sandwich? He's just a dude trying to get some taters and some gravy, much like myself. A guy perusing a diner menu, hoping to find that chicken fried steak breakfast is still being served afternoon, hoping to find that the hot turkey sandwich platter does, in fact, have cranberry sauce with it, and that it has real potatoes, not instant. Maybe he's a guy hoping to see a little meatloaf on there, little meatloaf with some green beans, maybe French style. I'm very, very all too familiar with diner menus. But yeah, but exactly, Silver Dollar. He's just another meat sack, just like the rest of us. No one's perfect. And then user Peyton K sums up how I feel about the video in general, just posting, "This makes me feel good." So thank you, Internet, for making me feel good and not being full of idiots for once.
Idiots of the Internet.
Well, thank you, Space Lizards, for voting in this topic on the app and the website. I would have never picked it. I don't think I would have ever heard of it. Now glad I know about Pennhurst. And I'm glad I know because it's made me reflect a lot on this issue. Caring for the intellectually disabled is, probably always will be a very complex issue. So many different situations. There's kids, for example, with, high-functioning autism who are much, much, much more self-reliant than other kids with extremely low IQs who also need a ton of care. They can be more self-reliant than kids who are quote-unquote normal, And then there's this, such a wide variety of people with such a wide variety of needs. For 2 years in Spokane back in 2006, 2007, I lived next door to a couple that had 3 boys. There's a couple in their 40s, and they had 3 kids, all in their teens. 2 of the sons perfectly healthy. I still see one at shows, stand-up shows in the area from time to time. He's a grown-ass man now. He's not working the drive-thru with the Spokane Valley Dairy Queen anymore. But the third son was and is severely disabled, can't speak, can't walk, severely physically deformed, sits in a specialized motorized wheelchair of sorts, has to have someone else move the chair around for him. Not sure how aware he is of his surroundings. He didn't seem, when I would be over there, to be aware at all. Can't control his bodily functions. Can't really do anything at all for himself. Can't communicate on almost any level. His mother, this angel of a human being, went back to school, got a nursing degree specific to nursing his type of disability. I can't remember the syndrome or whatever condition that he had. I remember it was rare, but she did that so she could become a full-time nurse, and that's what she was now. She didn't seem to be able to spend much time with her other 2 kids because her full-time 7 days a week around-the-clock job was taking care of the one child, and that would be her job until either he died or she died. And you could think, well, yeah, she's his mom. That's what you do. That's what you're supposed to do. But would you do that? Would you throw away any chance at a career? Would you throw away the ability to ever be present for anyone other than this one person in any type of consistent fashion in order to constantly take care of this person for the rest of their life or the rest of yours? Some person who may not even be able to cognitively understand that you're their parent. Think about how that would change your life. What if that became your life until you died of old age? Could you do it? If you couldn't, should the state be responsible for taking care of that human being? If so, are you willing to pay more taxes to have that be an option? Are you willing to advocate that more of your taxes should be allotted for that type of care so that is an option? And if that becomes the case, then what gets less funding because that's getting more? It's a fucking tough issue. That's why I didn't come, I think to a very judgy place against the people at Pennhurst. It's like, what are we supposed to do as a society with the members who can't take care of themselves? Is this issue solvable? Is it unsolvable on some level? What do we do? We start with treating the mentally handicapped with and people with intellectual disabilities with dignity and respect. We don't take advantage of them. We can check on them. We can try to make sure that others aren't taking advantage of them. And I guess we can vote for politicians who we believe are gonna pass more reforms and are gonna allot more money to their care and just agree that we're gonna have to pay for it because they can't pay for it themselves. I don't know. I'm curious what you're gonna write in about this one. I really am. And that's kind of, I'll just be continuing to babble if I go beyond that. So let's get to top 5 takeaways.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
Number 1, in 1968, local Philadelphia reporter Bill Baldini did a 5-part investigative expose on Pennhurst called Suffer the Little Children. And he lit the fire on a national discussion about how to care for the intellectually disabled that burns to this day. Number 2, Pennhurst, designed to remove people from society with mental defects as part of America's early 20th century eugenics movement. Yep, America had a eugenics movement. Again, Pennhurst chief physician would quote Henry H. Goddard, that leading eugenicist, saying every feeble-minded person is a potential criminal. That happened. Number 3, in 1977, U.S. District Judge Raymond J. Broderick ruled that the conditions at Pennhurst State School violated patients' constitutional rights. The lawsuit that led to this ruling was filed May 30th, 1974, by Philadelphia attorney David Furliger, representing the patients of the Pennhurst State School, and this lawsuit led to the institution closing its doors for good in 1987. Number 4, the intellectually disabled are still suffering. They're assaulted at 7 times the national average. Widespread abuse continues at many institutions designed to theoretically house and protect them. What do we do about this? Well, we keep thinking about it. We keep talking about it. We keep spreading the word for others to do the same. Number 5, new info. Some of the grounds at Pennhurst now offer paranormal tours. In addition to the haunted house thing I talked about earlier, the company that operates the haunted house offers a number of other tourist attractions. The About section of their website states Pennhurst, the legendary haunted hospital complex, has opened its doors after being abandoned for 25 years. Pennhurst Haunted Asylum is Pennsylvania's scariest destination haunted house. The fear is real at Pennhurst. So is this exploiting the intellectually disabled? And is it really haunted? I wouldn't want to spend a night there and find out. I feel like, sadly, a lot of very tragic deaths have occurred there, and if a place is going to be haunted, it's probably going to be one of them.
Timesuck Top 5 Takeaways.
All right, Pennhurst has been sucked. A little change of pace this week's suck. I like it. A lot of food for thought this week. You know, God, what do we do as a society to realistically improve the lives of the intellectually disabled? Big thanks to the Timesuck team, Harmony Vellekamp, Jesse Dobner, Reverend Dr. Joe Paisley. Thank you to Alex Dugan, the Bidelixer team, Danger Brain, Eric Radiker, Queen of the Suck, Lindsey Cummins. Thanks to OG Bojangles, research intern Heather Rylander for again knocking this shit out of the park. And next week, on Monday, we head to the Roman Empire. Specifically, we look at Spartacus. I'm very excited for this one, man. I've always been fascinated with Spartacus. We examine Rome's infamous, gladiatorial combat. Spartacus was a famous gladiator who led a famous uprising against the Roman Republic in the 1st century BCE. Well, what was life like for Spartacus and other gladiators at that time? What was life like in Rome? How big was his sword? Did he have 2 swords? Did he have a mace thingy? Did he have a shield? Did he not have a shield? Did he fight with lions? Did Bojangles fight as a gladiator as well? How did those dudes train and win their freedom? Did they body slam people sometimes? Did they fucking fight on boats? I don't know. There's a lot of things I want to find out. I'm really looking forward to getting into all these things, Gladiator. Are you not entertained? May have to watch that Russell Crowe movie again. May have to watch some old episodes of that old Star series called Spartacus again. Man, that season 1 of that show was incredible. Another hidden gem, I think. Spartacus season 1, it was on Stars like fucking 8 years ago or something. Incredible show. And then the poor lead actor died of, I believe it was Hodgkin's. He died of cancer before they could do season 2, which was really kind of jarring to me because he was so physically fit. Not that physically fit people can't die, but he was young, ripped, and then just gone. It's fucking crazy. Anyway, right now, let's get out of Spartacus. Let's get to some Timesucker updates.
Updates? Get your Timesucker updates.
First up is a Pancho Villa update from Timesucker Liz Espino. I probably fucked up your name now, Liz, even though you're calling me out on a Spanish pronunciation thing a little bit. Espino? I think it's Espino. Liz Espino. Liz sent in an email with the subject. It's Miguel Hidalgo, not Manuel. Oh, clearly I messed up there. I thought I knew it was Miguel. Okay, anyway, she says, Hola, querido maestro mamalón. Hello, dear master sucker. The suckiest of them all. My name is Liz, and while I live in Kansas, my motherland is Mexico. And she says, I was able to find out how much pesos translate to current pesos, by 2012 standards at least, and its equivalent in U.S. dollars, I found 10,000 old pesos equals 396,747. No, wait, 396,747,126 current pesos. Holy shit. Which equals $20,670,128. The site used is bajeco.com, cuanto.cfm. Sites in Spanish. Keep in mind, I calculated the equivalent of a peso in 1919 to one in 2002. Used the current exchange rate, leaving room for error. So that's a lot of money, which does prove that Pancho's capture was worth a fuck ton of money, as I said. Well, thank you, Liz. I love that update. I love that that's out there. Yeah, no wonder I couldn't find it. I wasn't Googling in Spanish. I appreciate it. Also, these updates will not reflect Friday's Toy Box Killer episode because I had to record this episode before that episode aired. Another Pancho Villa update, this time from Super Sucker Victor El Camino Sanchez. Says, Master Sucker, I just listened to your Pancho Villa suck, and I wanted to take the time to say thank you. I am an immigrant from Mexico, and after 26 years, I just became a legal permanent resident of the United States. Ever since I was a small child, I have only ever heard Mexicans described in a negative and dehumanizing way, going back to Proposition 187 in California. Google it. Listening to one of my favorite comedians do an in-depth and hilarious breakdown of the life and times of one of Mexico's most legendary and revered figures warms what is left of my cold black heart. I love that addition. I could not stop laughing during the Mexican Pootie and Juju. Thank you for always being thoughtful in your approach, for being curious. Most importantly, thank you for being so goddamn funny. Keep on sucking. Sincerely, Victor El Camino Sanchez. Thank you, Victor. Yes. Paco y Juanita. Muy poco también deal, Pootie. Jealous of you having a cool car, by the way, if you do have a Camino. Maybe that is, I guess that could be have nothing to do with cars, that word. But if you do, I'm jealous. Made me think of a Camino. Made me think of an old Camino. Made me think about how I want to get an old Ford pickup truck. Maybe like a 1960 Ford F-100, step side, lots of chrome, cherry that motherfucker out. Oh, anyway, I'm probably sleep deprived right now. Yeah, man, I'm glad you liked the episode. I have, honestly, legitimately always had a lot of respect for Mexican culture, especially living in LA for a long time. It is funny to me where, like, as you say, there are these knocks on Mexicans being described in a negative way. One way I heard it as a kid was always lazy. This that horrible adjective used to describe Mexicans, like lazy Mexicans. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Drive through any agricultural area. Who's out there busting their fucking backs, picking crops, planting seeds? Is it a bunch of white dudes? A bunch of white ladies? Fuck no, it's not. Which is one thing that's always got me fired up about immigration. People are like, they're taking our jobs. Okay, but some of the jobs, why aren't you fucking doing them? Why aren't you applying? You want to get out there? You want to get out there and bust your ass? Oh, you don't. You want to be in Starbucks with air conditioning. Well, I get it, but shut the fuck up. Okay, one more Poncho update from Timesucker and military listener Jacob Jones. Jacob, thank you for your service. Jacob writes, Dear Lord Suckmaster, the third Esquire. First time messenger, long time sucker. I stumbled upon your podcast when driving from Missouri to North Carolina. Got hooked immediately. Anyway, I just listened to the Pancho Villa podcast. You did an awesome job getting the info to us in such a funny way, man. I didn't know shit about Pancho except for he pissed off the U.S. at one point and was hunted down by General John J. Pershing. So I heard you mention his nickname, Blackjack. That took me back to when I was in ROTC at Mizzou, and I would teach a class on General Pershing's life. And he earned his nickname derived from a negative connotation, very negative, given to him by the cadets at West Point, where he was a drill and ceremony instructor. The cadets didn't like him due to his high standards, and assholes being assholes, the cadets would call him N-Bomb Jack, referencing his time with the 10th Cavalry, an all-black unit. The original nickname obviously did not stick for good reason and evolved into Blackjack. Wow, holy shit. Until you said this, I thought it had something to do with playing cards, like poker, playing like 21. I guess not poker, but you know what I mean. Pretty shitty history, but history nonetheless. Hope you found that tidbit of info to be interesting, and thanks for the time suck. I did find it interesting, and you're welcome. Yes, I listen to it on my way to work every morning, and it wakes me the fuck up when I drive to post. Love your stand-up and the podcast. So take it easy, Master Sucker. Respectively, Jake. Man, well, thank you, Jake. Yeah, man, that was a dark twist I didn't see coming. That's what a different time where they would just openly call him. N-Bomb Jack, Jesus Christ. One last one today from Suckhead and Wonderful Meat Sack, Troy Mangillo. He says, "What's the big deal? What is big deal? Why you stare at me when I suck soft shame cock? I bother no one. It's relaxing for me." I added a little bit there. He says, "What's big deal? Hail Nimrod for delivering us from the temptations of idiocy. Praise Bojangles and his one-eyed, three-legged gloriousness. Damn Lucifina with her wily charms. Hail Lord of the Suck, a.k.a. Dan Mother Suck and Prophet of the Curious. Cummins, a.k.a. Master of all the Sucks, a.k.a. insert funny caption here, Master Dan Cummins." I love the fucking preposterous amount of nicknames. I love it when you go through all of your aliases. He says, "I write to you because I want to thank you for all the knowledge sucking you have provided. I just recently became a space lizard. It's something I'm very proud of. Cult of the Curious is an amazing community. I'm proud to be part of it. I love listening to Suck during my dishwashing job. Your sweet, sweet voice has been blessed by Nimrod's ballsack. Cracks me up, especially when you slip seamlessly into one of your characters." Oh, thanks, man. I'm trying. I feel like I've been a little light on characters lately. I got to get him back in there a little heavier next few episodes. Ever since I moved up to a small town here in New York from the Big Apple, it's Things have been rough just trying to make ends meet. I'll spare you the details, but upon discovering your podcast through Pandora, my life has gotten better. When you pull out the Triple M, it turns a rainy day into sunshine in seconds. Well, I did do that today, right? I threw in a little... Little humming Michael motherfucking McDonald just happened there. He's got Triple M'd in a humming method. Okay, anyway. He says, I made the move to pursue a business venture I started with my best friend of 27 years. That's awesome. We started a toy company called the Ursonauts. That's cool. We've been trying to get off the ground. We have a social media presence, but, due to life, it's taking a back seat. I hear that, man, which we are not proud of. I've been in a downward spiral of depression, constantly feeling like all I ever do is fail, combined with several dating disasters. All I could feel was emptiness. I hated life itself. One day I had Pandora on, heard your advert for Timesuck, listened to the Golden State Killer, and you almost fooled me with your fake story about the West End rapist. I think that's what you called him, and I was hooked. I don't even remember what the hell I called him. I say so much crazy shit on here. I know this is getting a bit long in the tooth, and I apologize for that, but I want you to know you've become one of my heroes. Never lose your absurdness, nor your curiosity. The best advice I was given was when I was finishing high school, and my bio teacher said to me, it doesn't matter what you choose to do in life, but be a learned man and read everything. Never let your knowledge stagnate. Oh, man, that is so fucking true. I think so, man. Anyway, I love your stand-up, especially the spoons. Yeah, here come the spoons, motherfucker. Thank you for being a curious motherfucker. Keep the suck going. And for the love of Nimrod, can you do a gig up here in Hudson Valley? Fan and curious cult member for life, Troy. Oh, man, well, I don't know if, hopefully the Hudson Valley works. Hopefully I can do gigs where people want me to go, because hopefully the suck keeps spreading, and I can, have a big enough audience to do gigs all over the fucking place. And, sorry that life has been a little hard, but I like your attitude. I like your outlook. And, man, all you can do is just keep pushing, just keep grinding, follow that passion. Don't give up. If you hit a wall, just stand back, let it go for a day or two. Think about how you can get around it. Think about how you can try to bust through, try something else. And then that's it. And then just never stop. Just never stop doing that. It's no guarantee you're going to succeed, but stopping to do that is a guarantee that you will fail. For sure. Love you, buddy. Love all you guys for sending that stuff in. Thank you.
Thanks, time suckers. I needed that.
We all did.
That's all for today, time suckers. Have a great week. Take care of each other. Be extra kind to somebody who maybe has a little heavier load than you do to carry through life. You keep on sucking.